Hi, I'm Ted London, Vice President at the William Davidson Institute and a faculty member at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. And today I'm with Madison Ayer, the Executive Chairman of HoneyCare. Madison, thanks for being here.
It's great to be here, Ted. Thanks.
Madison, you joined HoneyCare about 4 or 5 years ago. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you there?
It was an intriguing opportunity. HoneyCare was a social enterprise with a great history and a great story that had developed, but really needed to evolve to a new version of the business. And looking at strategies for scaling, looking at what the impact of the organization really was. And so it was a great opportunity for me to join and lead that process, lead the strategic evolution of it.
So when you got there, HoneyCare obviously was focusing on working with smallholder farmers to get honey, but that was primarily in Kenya. What did you see when you got there, and what were some of the changes you implemented?
It was really a Kenya-focused organization at that point. There'd been a few projects in Tanzania and South Sudan, but those were no longer active. And so what we needed to do was determine what is the real model here. We had to look at the economics of it, because running a small supply chain, but in remote parts of that part of the continent, it becomes very expensive. So we really had to think about the economics of a model that could scale and that could become sustainable. So we went through an extended strategic process, looking at both what the business model could be and what the impact model could be. And that process ended up taking a period of years, and along the way we knew that we reached specific milestones and that it developed as we went. And so now it's been about 5 years and we have all of the elements in place. We're operating across the region now, and we're looking at the next stage of expansion.
So when you talk about the strategic process, when you got done, sort of what was the big goal that you were heading towards, and then what were some of those milestones that you achieved along the way?
We knew that we had to keep the DNA of HoneyCare, which was a social enterprise. It was a business with a social mission at its core. And we knew that we needed to keep that. But we also knew that we needed to restructure it from a social enterprise, which is not actually an entity. We needed a model of a real business that could scale, because ultimately the economic viability and the impact depend on scale. Otherwise it just remains a small subsidized project. And so it became clear that HoneyCare actually needed to be a fast-moving consumer goods company. Getting into these rapidly growing consumer markets, the emerging middle class in Africa, that was the real economic opportunity. And the margins that we could achieve with a successful position in those consumer markets are what would sustain the rest of the supply chain and the rest of the business model. So once that became clear, we knew that we had to develop our strategy around that.
One of the first things you did was to enhance the supply of honey, and you began to look at new areas so that you can sort of manage the volatility of honey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
First and foremost, we have to have a product to go into markets, and you can't build distribution without having a product to distribute. So we knew that we were supply constrained in the beginning, and so that was the first step to resolve that. So we built out our supply chain, invested heavily in it in Kenya, and in 2012 we expanded it into South Sudan, and now in 2015 we've expanded it into Tanzania as well. So that gives us some scale. That allows some economies of scale in our production and our management of this. It also gives us geographical diversification, which is really important for an agricultural supply chain. For example, every year we'll see certain areas that have droughts and there will not be a honey harvest. So we need to be able to diversify that. Having made those investments now over the recent years, we no longer have a supply constraint. We have a a great production model across the region. And so now more recently, we've focused our attention on the consumer distribution side.
So in focusing your attention on the consumer distribution side, you've attacked sort of at least two broad categories. Can you talk about that?
We've built out the product based on honey, so first of all. And primarily, Honeycare's history of sales has been in modern trade. So selling jars of honey, a variety of honeys. We have a premium line, we have a regular line of honeys, we have a couple of flavor-infused honeys. And that's primarily been Honeycare's revenue model in the consumer markets. More recently, we have begun to build out our infrastructure in the traditional trade. And this is where the majority of consumer commerce is still happening on the continent. In Kenya, it's about 70% of consumer markets are still informal. In Tanzania, it's closer to 90% that's still informal. So not being present in those was going to be a huge gap for us in becoming this FMCG company. So in recent years, we've been building out our infrastructure to distribute in these traditional trade areas, and it's a totally different model, and it's expensive to develop, but we've been relatively successful in learning what will work, what will not work. We understand the metrics of how to manage it. And probably one of the most important things we've learned is that having this infrastructure just for distributing a single line of honey products is not economically viable. The FMCG companies that have been successful in the traditional trade, and this includes both multinationals and domestic businesses, those that are successful have a much broader line of products that they can distribute. And it's only with that larger product mix that the economics become viable. So as our next strategic shift, we knew that we needed to expand our product line beyond just the niche honey market.
You've sort of sorted out to some degree both the supply and demand issues for honey. You've begun to expand and leverage that asset to add other products. Can you talk about those products?
So what we've developed, Honeycare is known for now, is this sustainable supply chain. And it operates in 3 countries across the region right now. We've built out this distribution, and Honeycare is known for trustworthy, authentic honey. We've built a solid brand equity for that. And now having those assets, our next strategic necessity is to leverage that into a broader category. And what makes the most sense is the snacking category. And healthy snacks are high growth. The snacking category in general is quite large. It's growing quite rapidly. And so there's significant opportunities there. And so we looked at our whole supply chain from production all the way in the jungles of South Sudan and the acacia bush of northern Kenya, all the way to our distribution in the urban markets in Kenya, and said, how can we leverage this supply chain? And a couple of things became apparent pretty quickly. We needed to go into sesame seeds, and we needed to go into peanuts. This is because across much of our supply chain, many of our existing smallholder producers can actually produce these as well. So that's a great way to leverage that infrastructure that we've put in. It's a great way to leverage those relationships that we've already established. And it also enhances the impact that we're creating with these families. We can magnify the income that they're generating now just by working with us. On the consumer side, these allow us to get into the snacking category. So in the first part of 2016, we'll launch our new line of snack products. They're all based on honey. That's how we leverage this brand equity that we've developed. It also leverages the very positive, healthy connotation that honey generally has. And so that's the foundation of creating this healthy snacks line. So we'll launch a sesame seed cracker based on honey. We'll launch honey roasted peanuts. We will launch a peanut butter spread infused with honey. And then from there, we can go into cashews, we can go into other combinations of these bars, honey roasted things, and so that'll be the foundation of the new product line.
You've taken a model that started with honey in Kenya. You've added 2 new countries, sort of a more robust supply chain of honey. And then from there, you're beginning to add more products to build out your product line so that it leverages the economies of scales of both your supply chain and your distribution. And you're doing this now in 3 countries. What's next?
Well, we have to make this work first, so we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. 2016 will really be the year to make sure that the new products are fitting in with the market. We've done prototyping, we've done piloting. We use sort of a lean startup process to introduce new products, and we're very positive about them, of course. But until we actually see them full-scale commercial deployment, we don't know what's really going to fit in the market. So 2016 will be the year to prove that and nail down which of these can be flagship products. In parallel with that, we also have to make sure that especially if one of these products really takes off quickly, we have to make sure that we can continue to produce it. And so it'll be a lot of operational focus on the supply chain, on the production end of it, to make sure that we can actually fulfill the demand if it's there. That'll be our focus in 2016. However, we are also thinking about expansion geographically as well. And that takes some time. It takes some time to enter new regions, to enter new countries. And so we don't wait until we're ready to do that. We do need to begin it earlier. And so there are a couple of countries that we'll be looking at exploring in 2016 as well. We'll probably begin some pilot operations on the ground just to get a better sense of how everything works, what the infrastructure is like, what the culture is like, what the financial situation, the economy is like, and what the consumer markets are like. The top 3 countries that we'll be looking at are Uganda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, and Ethiopia.
It seems you've been on quite a journey over the last 5 years, taking an organization, refining its current model, expanding its portfolio, its geographic reach, and then continuing to grow. So thanks for sharing that, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in the future.